committee is now in session. Good morning, everyone. Good morning to the witnesses. As we've all been waiting, today is the day that we'll finally be able to ask follow-up questions from the presentation that we received and the tour that we took of Center Block. Before we begin with questions, I wanted to just remind everyone that this committee is webcasted. So that is the default for all meetings unless a televised meeting is requested specifically. We have webcasting that is taking place, and so it's no longer just the audio recording, but also the visual that is being recorded, just so all the members are aware. We hopefully we do have some committee business, so hopefully we can get through the questions, leaving us with maybe 15 minutes at the end of the meeting so that we can resolve some of those issues that can be brought up at that time, but we'll see how it goes. So I may, if there are a lot of questions, I may call the meeting or this part of the meeting to an end about 15 minutes early. So let's start with Mr. Richards is first on the list. Okay, Mr. Richards, you're first on the list for questions.
We put you on the list.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. We're prepared if you
Sure,
want.
I'll let one of my colleagues.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay, Mr. Broussard.
Okay. Oh, Mr. Tucker? Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes.
Sorry.
Thank you very much. My questions are about the lack of costing in this plan. Seemingly, the first decision that is parliamentarians are being asked for input on is this visitor center that is a hole in the ground right now, and it's dug. But we haven't had any feedback on the costing of the three options. So even a rough estimates of the difference in cost of 1, 2, and 3, what would they be?
Thank you for the question. So it is an important question that we have to, I think, work through together, and we would be able to, as we continue to develop the requirements for the Visitor Welcome Center, to come back with some, high-level comparisons. Of course, it is hard to give cost estimates before we have the definition of the requirements from Parliament, and that is, there's a number of material decisions that would have impact on scope, cost, and schedule. So I completely understand the question and frustration, and at the same time, very difficult to give costing without knowing whether there's committee rooms going in the Visitor Welcome Center or not committee rooms, the desire. So there's functionality as well as size, and they have material impacts on costs. So getting a little deeper into an understanding of what Parliament would like to see in the Visitor Welcome Center will be very helpful for us coming back to give some comparisons on costs.
I find it kind of bizarre. It's similar to someone going through a house construction. You have a contractor that's going to redo your front entrance, and they give you 3 examples to choose from. And obviously, if money had no bearing on the decision, everyone would pick the most grand and biggest one. So how are we to actually make a determination on seemingly one of the first questions involved is concerning, to say the least. Other question. So when will we find those? When would this committee find out those numbers? I know you're saying you got to tell me what you need in order to come back at us with a cost. But if this committee, as I understand, we don't have the power to say pick a decision today. But if we wanted to find out an actual breakdown of cost between the 3, how long would that take to provide us?
Right. So one of the challenges that we face with the Center Block and the Visitor Welcome Center, which is a bit of a shift from, say, the West Block, which we did in collaboration for the House of Commons, or the former Government Conference Centre, now the Senate of Canada building for the Senate of Canada, is that this facility requires input from all parts of Parliament. So it's requirements from the House as well as from the Senate, the Library of Parliament, as well as, of course, and Parliamentary Protective Service. So we are working through that at the officials level. But until we get a kind of an integrated feedback on those elements, it is very difficult to give costing. But we are 100% committed to working through that process with you. So as we get the feedback on what you would like to see in each of those options, we can then come back with cost comparisons. And so it's a bit of an iterative process. It is difficult to give you anything that would be useful from a cost per comparison, whether we don't, whether there are, for example, Senate committee rooms in the Visitor Welcome Center or not, how much of an interpretive program. So we are starting to get good ideas on that, but feedback from you on what you would want to see that will be very important for us to then be able to come back with here's some cost comparisons to support the decision-making process.
All right, so we're not going to get any cost on the actual plan going forward. Can we look at past costs so that this committee can have an understanding on projects of similar scale? What was the initial budget? What was the initial timeline? And what did it end up at?
Sure.
Prime example being this building.
Yep. So, and since the long-term vision and plan was recalibrated in 2006, 2007, quite a strong track record on delivering projects on schedule and on budget. Consecutively, 24 major projects delivered on time and on budget. And I can walk through a couple of those if that is helpful. Phase 1 of the Visitor Welcome Center, for example, $129 million. That was a 5,000 square meter facility. So it gives you a bit of some benchmarking of some cost comparison. So about approximately 5,000 square meters, $129 million, delivered on schedule in 2018. This building delivered for $863 million on budget and delivered in 2018. The Senate of Canada building, which also included some other space for senators, delivered in 2018 for $269 million, again on budget. The Wellington building delivered in 2016 at a value of $425 million. The Old Bank of Montreal, the now Sir John A. Macdonald conference facility, delivered in 2015 for a cost of $99.5 million, again on budget and on schedule. So those are some examples. We can go through some more if you'd like.
Okay, thank you. That's all the time that you have, Mr. Tucker. Mr. Gerritsen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just for the record, how much time?
6 minutes.
6 minutes, thanks. My questions are about the Senate committee that is providing input into the process. Who would be the best to answer those questions? Okay, great. So I have a number of questions. How many members how many Senate members are on their committee?
To my understanding, it's the Committee on Internal Budgets and Administration, and there is traditionally a subcommittee on the LTVP to that to the long-term vision and plan, the work that we're undertaking. The restoration and modernization of the precinct. To my understanding, that committee is still being kind of stood up. I don't know that the final. I think that is almost finalized, but I don't think that the final membership has been determined.
Okay. How many members were there? And do you know the composition?
The numbers would be similar to this committee,
okay.
not
and
entirely.
Do you know how is there a method in which the composition is determined?
I think that is, in a little bit of potentially in a little bit of flux in the Senate
okay.
as the.
When was it formed? That committee.
I've been here for over 15 years working on this, and it pre-existed.
Okay. Do you know how often that they meet to discuss center block specifically?
There's been fairly active engagement with the Senate on the work ongoing to revitalize the parliamentary precinct over a number of years.
Do you know how often that they meet, though? Like, are they meeting like weekly, monthly? Can you give me a rough idea?
So there's a bit of a combination between Senate administration appearing without Public Services and Procurement Canada, and then we are called to some of those meetings. I would say over the past 10 years or so, I've attended probably in excess of 20 meetings of the Board of Internal Economy and the Committee of Internal Budgets and Administration.
Okay, so you don't know how often they meet to discuss their center block input?
I couldn't.
You don't. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know if the meetings that they have are public or private?
So traditionally, the Committee on Internal Budgets and Administration has been broadcast. The subcommittee is in camera traditionally.
Okay. And can you describe what their level of input has been? Like, what kind of stuff are they commenting on, whether it's center block or this building or like what? How are they participating? Are they getting into the weeds of what color the carpet is, or are they more high level in terms of size of rooms and stuff like that?
I would say it's been grosso modo quite similar. What are the core requirements? The number of committee rooms, where parliamentary offices would be, the requirements for a chamber, for example. The galleries for a chamber, security, and the range of elements that we kind of discussed in our presentation a week ago.
And would you say that the administration is receptive of their input? Do you think that there's value to the Senate's input?
It's hard for me to speak to
Maybe
the dynamics between the Senate administration and senators, but there's been an active engagement over the years on the work ongoing in the precinct.
Do you see value in the Senator's contribution?
I would say for us,
or would you rather they just get out of the way?
For us, we work within a governance framework of which there's two independent houses of parliament, and we do our best to serve you equally.
Okay. The last major renovation was, the rebuilding in 1916 was the last, to this level of renovation. Are you aware of what the Senate or the House's input into that was? Was there a committee that existed? Was it a joint committee? Was it something maybe? And the question, if somebody else knows more details about it, I'd like to hear it. But what level of engagement was coming from the Senate and the House?
It's a good question. I am not. I wouldn't say I would be able to respond to that today.
Does somebody else have any? I have 1 minute left. I'd love to.
We know that Pearson worked very closely with the Speaker of the House at that time on some of the elements. So Pearson was the architects employed by PSPC, but there was involvement through the Speaker. Through
the Speaker. Do you know if there was a committee you don't know?
We can see if there's anything.
Can you
research.
look into that and let us know? It would be nice to get an understanding of what the level of engagement was from the House and the Senate, and how that was structured then. And it would also be wise to know what that input could look like now. I think that's about my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Monsieur Terrien.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm so glad to see you here today. I do have a question. I don't know if I'm in order or not, but since you've given us a variety of scenarios, we can see the number of members varies per scenario. How do you decide what would be the appropriate number? Given the scenarios that you look at, how can you choose which scenario will be the one to use? Who would be responsible for that, and how would the choice be made?
Following the legislation, which predicts essentially the amount of MPs that we would be planning for. After that, once we have that scenario, those are the options that we are putting forward, and it would go up through the governance process for approval.
Now, with respect to the budget, because I imagine the bigger the construction, the more expensive it's going to be. We have the Conservatives who are talking about the possibility of looking at the different budgets that would have to be supported. I thought, and well, I imagine, given as you say, it's rare that you actually do a job that it is so big as this one. Are we just going to forge ahead and do whatever? Do you have a limit in terms of budget that is imposed on you? Well, yes. The budget is certainly very important. Of course, before we begin with the actual construction, we must have a very tight budget with a deadline attached to it. And after that, we have to respect the budget and the deadlines.
Right now, where we're in an iterative piece of back and forth of really understanding what the Houses of Parliament want in this centre block and the Visitor Welcome Centre. And then we'll be able to give you, once that becomes a little more clear, we'll be able to give you those cost comparisons so that you can make informed decisions. That is critically important. And then we will do, it'll be our job to respect that budget and that schedule once that is established. And so it would be our hope that over the next several months, we would be able to go through that process together. And then we would be able to go to the Treasury Board in the fall to get that baseline scope, budget, and schedule. And then on we would proceed.
OK. Vous savez, les questions que je pose, c'est vraiment pas une acquisition. C'est juste ça.
I'm not, it's not an inquisition here. I'm asking questions for my own edification. I know that you look at the demographics that allow you to say in 50 years or so we should have such and such an increase in the number of members. Do you base yourself largely on these demographic estimates insofar as possible? I would imagine you do. Inaudible. Well, I do have no other questions. Thank you.
Monsieur Therian, Ms. Blaney.
Well, first of all, I just want to thank you all for the tour. It was very informative and a little bit sad as a person who once sat in that place to see it sort of under construction. So I guess for me, I see in your presentation to us that you do have key decision timelines. And so I think, accountability and the finance is really important. I think of the people in my riding and, they think they're getting a big renovation if they're spending $100,000. That's like a big deal. So this is a significant, bigger renovation. So I'm just wondering if you could speak to a little bit some of the decisions, like, for example, you have in here the House of Commons chamber. That's a pretty significant one. We know that the population of Canada is growing. As a result, eventually our parliament will grow as a reflection. So I'm just wondering, how does that process unfold and how are these decisions made? And then when you look at it comparably to the financial ramifications, I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about the process and timeline.
I can start.
Start on that.
Yeah, and I think you underline a really important decision point, of which there are many, and the House of Commons chamber is critically important for a number of reasons, and maybe I can underline three. So one, this is all of the projects that we undertake within the parliamentary precinct. There is a tension between the heritage and functionality and elements such as accessibility and security, and the goal is always to find the appropriate balance point. This is the House of Commons chamber is perhaps one of the highest heritage places in Canada. It also this stress point between heritage and functionality.
Alors, la difficulté de trouver un juste équilibre entre la fonctionnalité et le patrimoine pose un problème. Donc, nous devons restaurer, moderniser, tout en répondant aux besoins des parlementaires et nous devons travailler ensemble afin de s'assurer de respecter cet espace patrimonial également. Il y a un impact important sur les coûts. Selon la décision qui est prise, il y a un impact matériel sur le budget général pour l'édifice du centre. Donc, au fur et à mesure que nous avançons dans le projet, on nous a posé une question précédemment au sujet de la gouvernance entre la Chambre et le Sénat. En fait, c'est une question pour la Chambre également. Il faut tenir compte de toutes les observations, tous les intérêts exprimés par les deux chambres. Et c'est un défi dans le cadre de ce projet et encore plus, sans doute, à l'édifice du centre, puisque nous travaillons avec tous nos partenaires parlementaires. Donc, encore une fois, je dirais qu'il est difficile d'être un comité de la Chambre des communes, alors que dans quelques semaines, on va aller à un comité du Sénat. Il faudra rationaliser ces points de vue. Et une fois que cette rationalisation commence à être faite, eh bien, je pense que nous pourrons vous revenir avec une comparaison des coûts. Mais il est difficile de le faire tant qu'on n'a pas eu toutes ces conversations. Il faut s'assurer d'avoir toute la rétroaction nécessaire avant de prendre une décision. Vous savez, une chose que j'ai vue clairement lors de la rénovation de cet édifice-ci, lorsque les gens sont venus nous rencontrer, c'est qu'il y avait des défis très précis. Donc, il faut consulter avec les membres du personnel, les députés, quant à la façon dont l'espace serait utilisé. Alors, je me demande si vous pourriez nous parler de ce processus. À quoi est-ce qu'il ressemblera? Et est-ce qu'on a tiré des leçons de la rénovation, de l'exercice de rénovation de cet immeuble? Eh bien, comme je l'ai déjà dit, personnellement, j'estime que les députés n'ont pas été suffisamment consultés par rapport à la rénovation de l'édifice de l'Ouest. C'est pour cette raison que nous comparaissons devant votre comité et que nous avons des discussions avec la régie interne également. Nous pouvons vous donner une liste des points sur lesquels il faut consulter les parlementaires. Par exemple, l'expansion au nom de la Chambre, pour tenir compte de la croissance du nombre des députés, par exemple. Alors, c'est très important pour nous que vous soyez engagés comme il se doit et il faut avoir une liste assez détaillée. Ça peut donner l'impression de ne pas être important, mais cela est très important. C'est votre lieu de travail et vous devez définir votre environnement pour l'avenir. Je sais qu'il est parfois difficile de faire des projections dans 10 ans, par exemple, mais comme on l'a déjà dit, lorsque nous avons présenté notre exposé la dernière fois, nous voulons faire une rénovation de l'édifice du centre pour les 100 prochaines années. Je sais que c'est un exercice difficile, mais comme Rob l'a mentionné, il faudra présenter des options, des scénarios pour obtenir votre rétroaction. Ensuite, nous vous reviendrons en vous présentant des options et des coûts liés à ces options lorsque nous aurons mieux défini les critères et ces coûts seront alors plus clairs, mieux définis pour l'avenir. Merci, Monsieur Brassard. Eh bien, merci, Madame la Présidente et Monsieur Wright. Merci. Merci à tous ceux qui participent au projet et qui sont venus la semaine dernière pour nous faire visiter l'édifice du centre et qui sont revenus aujourd'hui pour répondre à d'autres questions. Comme Madame Blaney, on voit ce symbole iconique de notre démocratie qui est en train d'être rénové. Ça fait en sorte que bien des émotions font surface. J'aurais quelques questions à vous poser. D'abord, est-ce que le ministre actuel a est-ce que la ministre actuelle a été informée? Est-ce de la vision et des idées que vous présentez à ce comité? Absolument. Je peux dire en fait que la première chose qu'a fait la nouvelle ministre a été de visiter la colline parlementaire, surtout l'édifice du centre. On lui a fait faire une visite un peu comme celle qu'on vous a fait faire la semaine dernière. Il y a eu des séances d'information avec la ministre et avec les membres de son personnel qui estiment qu'il s'agit là d'un dossier très important. Et nous nous sommes engagés à avoir un bon partenariat. Et puisqu'on parle de partenariat, les partenaires parlementaires, comme vous l'avez dit, M. Wright, sont importants dans tout ce processus lors de des échanges d'idées. Les parlementaires donneront toutes sortes d'idées, proposeront toutes sortes de choses quant à la fonctionnalité. Les salles de comité, par exemple, on nous a déjà dit que le Sénat parlait d'une possibilité de 10 salles de comité pour la télévision. Est-ce que vous vous sentirez à l'aise de contester certaines de ces idées en disant, écoutez, la fonctionnalité, eh bien, il y a des choses qu'on ne peut pas faire à cet égard sur le plan pratique. Est-ce que vous allez faire cela éventuellement? Eh bien, je dirais qu'il y a 2 éléments à cette question. Quotidiennement, nous travaillons avec l'administration de la Chambre et celle du Sénat et de la Bibliothèque du Parlement. Et je dirais que ce sont des échanges très sains que nous avons avec eux tous les jours. Notre responsabilité consiste à réaliser cette fonctionnalité. C'est un défi, bien sûr, mais lorsqu'on a un édifice comme l'édifice de centre qui est iconique, eh bien, il faut se demander si tout doit être à cet endroit. Est-ce qu'on peut avoir certaines fonctionnalités dans l'édifice de l'Ouest ou de l'Est, par exemple? Ensuite, c'est à l'administration de donner des conseils aux parlementaires à cet égard. Ensuite, il y a une autre discussion de 2e niveau, mais nous parlons de ces questions quotidiennement avec l'administration. Ensuite, il y a une conversation avec les parlementaires, comme nous le faisons à l'heure actuelle. Donc, je dirais que c'est un défi que nous relevons au niveau de la fonctionnalité depuis la dernière année. C'est un exercice que nous faisons quotidiennement. Je suis heureux de l'entendre, car vous allez recevoir toutes sortes d'idées. Bien souvent, pour des raisons pratiques, elles ne pourront être réalisées, comme vous l'avez dit. Ma dernière question porte sur la loi. À l'heure actuelle, il semblerait que le tiers de la pelouse de la colline parlementaire ne fera pas partie de ce nouveau processus. Je sais qu'il y a toutes sortes de décisions qui restent à prendre, mais est-ce qu'on peut assurer les Canadiens que la majeure partie de cette pelouse qui est utilisée pour toutes sortes de raisons historiques depuis de nombreuses années sera maintenue? Je ne parle pas de garder la pelouse verte, mais l'espace physique, est-ce qu'il sera maintenu à l'avenir? Réponse, absolument. En fait, on parle de pelouse verte dans bien des cas. Le centre d'accueil des visiteurs sera intégré un peu comme on a fait à la phase 1 de ce centre de visiteurs. Il y aura différentes options pour ce centre de visiteurs, mais certaines options qui sont présentées font en sorte qu'on garde la majeure partie, la grande majorité de cet espace vert de pelouse. Et il y aura un point d'entrée pour ce centre de visiteurs qui sera aligné avec cet escalier qui mène de la pelouse au centre, à l'édifice du centre. Donc, ce sera intégré. Il y a une option, un centre de visiteurs plus vaste, plus grand, qui aura un point d'entrée central qui pourrait être un peu plus au sud. Mais même avec cela, on garde la majeure partie de la pelouse verte. Merci, c'est la fin de votre temps de parole, monsieur. Ceux qui aiment bien aller au yoga en seront ravis, dit le député. Je vous rappelle que nous n'avons pas eu encore de questions officiellement, de période de questions officiellement à ce comité, mais je voudrais vous rappeler en quoi cela consiste. Le premier tour de table, 6 minutes par intervenant. Ensuite, le deuxième tour de table, 5 minutes. Conservateurs, libéraux, conservateurs et Parti libéral. Et 2,5 minutes en commençant par le Bloc québécois et le NPD. Donc, nous avons commencé le premier tour de table de 5 minutes. Nous allons donc continuer par en donnant la parole à Madame Duncan. Eh bien, merci Madame la Présidente et je voudrais remercier les témoins d'être venus nous rencontrer pas seulement une fois, mais 2 fois et de nous avoir fait faire cette visite de première classe. L'édifice du centre est certainement iconique, un édifice patrimonial iconique. Ce n'est pas seulement un immeuble. Ça représente notre passé, notre avenir et on veut faire la bonne chose. Je me demande si il y a 2 choses que je pourrais déposer ou qui pourraient être déposées auprès du comité. Les coûts projetés de 381 pour les 381 députés plutôt que 400 quelques députés.
Resources that'll be required. So that's one. I also believe there was a study done in 1996, I think, that would increase the number of seats within the chamber to 400 or 400 plus. Can those the 2 things be tabled with the committee?
Yes. So thank you for the question, Madam Chair. So I'll start with the second one first. We do have lots of studies on how the chamber could be, we could put in additional seating. And so right now, we're kind of in the existing footprint in the 420-some zone of how many seats could be integrated into there.
Sorry, if I could, thank you. You don't have to. If you could just table those 2, if you don't mind. And I have a report here, and I'd just like the committee to be aware that on April 24th of 1916, a joint parliamentary committee was struck to oversee the reconstruction. So I think it's important because I, too, as Mr. Gerritsen talked about, I'm concerned about the governance of the project. And picking up on my colleague, Mr. Brassard's comments, can you explain how the governance for key decisions relative to functional requirements are being taken, i.e., how are the decisions being prioritized and challenged to ensure highest and best use, please?
Right. Sure. Did you? Okay. So it is. So I guess it's multi-layered. It is a complex governance there, and the Canadian example is quite unique. In most countries, the legislative branch is fully responsible for their parliament buildings, and nation building, as you would know, went through cycles around the globe, and most countries went through a nation building cycle in the mid to late 19th century, and parliament buildings are in the same condition as ours around the world. And we're working with, we've developed an international network of which there's about 17 countries involved. So we do have a fair amount of engagement there. So even, and countries are facing governance challenges as they move into these major initiatives. So, for example, the Palace of Westminster is developing a sponsor board and a delivery authority. The Austrian Parliament legislated a private company to undertake the work. In the United States, there's the Architect of the Capitol, which is a fully set up kind of office. So there are differences around the world, but there's I would say a division between the executive and the legislative branch, and then the two houses of parliament are independent as well. So as we move through it, we have to work with each parliament. So before a major initiative goes forward, we go to the Senate committee. We go to the Board of Internal Economy at the House of Commons traditionally, and then we would take that and go for government approvals at the Cabinet and Treasury Board levels, and then we would implement that. That becomes even more complex when we have an integrated project like the Centre Block and the Visitor Welcome Centre than the West Block or the Government Conference Centre.
Could I just raise one last thing? I was going to talk about the lawn, but I too I'm concerned that when Pearson designed the building, it was as a complete work of art. How do we ensure the decorative elements, the oak desk, the clerk's table, that this is preserved?
The answer can be incorporated into Mr. Duncan's answer, perhaps. Depends on what your question is, Mr. Duncan.
Thank you very much, and thank you for being here. I take a bit of a different angle. I was a Hill staffer for 9 years in Centre Block, so the baseboard heating and the wires all over the place and the random sinks, was definitely time to do some work on the building. If I mention the word, the phrase, the Holyrood Inquiry, does anybody know what I mean by that? And that would be the report that happened with the Scottish Parliament. So just a quick background, that building was to be completed around 2001. It was several years late. Original estimates were supposed to be between $17 and $70 million, and it ended up at $731 million. It's riveting reading. It's 200 pages. I've been through most of it. Yes, I have no life. I apologize. I acknowledge that. But I will say with that, I do find a lot of similarities or concerns respectively with the process. And this is not so much a shot on you as it is to the overall governance, going back to some of the questions that have been raised about the decision-making ability here and who exactly has that, yes. And then the other aspect of it is deadlines. And I'll build on that a little bit. But that report goes through the whole management cost increases, design changes, and those types of things. And frankly, I get a little worried, and respectfully saying this, we're digging a hole on the front lawn, but we don't know what it's going to be in it, and we don't know how much it's going to cost. To me, and I think average Canadians would be watching that might be a bit concerned by that. So I'm just worried, a little bit, and it's not so much it's the tools that you've been dealt trying to see this project through about some of that governance. I don't know if you have any comments on the Holyrood Inquiry, if there's lessons learned from that, but maybe give you a chance to comment on it.
Sure. Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. So I would say a couple of elements. So I'll deal first with the Visitor Welcome Centre and the excavation work. So the approach we're taking with that is essentially what I would call a no regrets approach. So we've tendered it in a way so that it is scalable. And so the goal would be to be able to, over the next several months, to be able to take those decisions to align with the excavation. The excavation will take a significant amount of time. And so we've tendered that in a way so that it'll align as well as possible with decision making, and there's no delays. So decision making obviously is critical. Resilient decision making is fundamental. So the agility of the decision making, but this level of engagement should hopefully get to a point where there's not later changes. We get resilient decisions, and that is really the critical to these types of projects. Changes are what have a significant impact. So the work that we've done on the assessment program about de-risking unknowns and working through this engagement to ensure that there is consensus around where we're going is a solid approach to ensure that we're able to move forward. Over the past decade plus, in partnership with parliamentary partners, we have, integrated a host of lessons learned and developed capacity and competencies to be able to complete this work, and have demonstrated a track record of being able to deliver these projects on time and on budget. So we've got from a management perspective of the project, a fairly well-oiled machine to be able to implement this. And it's really going through this engagement process to get to decisions that Parliament will be comfortable with today, in 10 years, and 100 years from now.
If I can build on that with the engagement aspect. So again, respectfully, I think right now we're consulting about the consultation process almost in terms of, for members of Parliament, for example, what the forum is for us to have a say. And I can tease my colleagues, I'm one of them now. You can ask 338 members of Parliament their opinion or ideas, and you're going to get 500. So, how do you narrow that down in terms of the decision-making process amongst ourselves? Is it just our committee? Is it the minister that has the final say? Is it PROC? Is that decided yet in terms of having to do that? And my second question, because I know my time may be getting limited, is working back on reverse time frame. So if the goal, I understand, I think is, I wish you well, is 10 years to be back, for example, in center block, whatever that time frame may be. If we're working backwards on what are the deadlines that you need from us, a final answer on what a consensus is, whatever that may be. Because I worry as we spend all this time consulting and all of a sudden, well, because we took months to decide, all of a sudden now we're 1 year, 2 year, costs are different. So can you work backwards and give us, if we're going to keep on the time frames that you have right now, we need a final answer from members on all these items by X date?
For the first part of your question, in terms of past decisions that were made with regards to the House of Commons requirement, these have been made by the Board of Internal Economy. So, for example, you talk about the hole that is planned to be dug. That was decided back in June, and the board decided at that time to go for the middle option in terms of the visitor welcome center, with the understanding that it could be scaled up or down.
The three options.
Yeah. So, but that's the middle ground, and with the understanding once requirements are defined and so on. So decision making, past decision has been made by the board. Over the last few decades, like I said before, sometimes not in the level of detail that I would feel satisfied in terms of, but the board has been really engaged in the past. It's been over a year now that we've been in this building, but the board was really engaged in terms of the transition, in terms of the decision to when move from the center block to the west block, and also in terms of the follow-up, in terms of all the things that needed to be corrected.
That's all the time we have. But I don't know if we really got to the question of, are there internal deadlines set for certain things?
So the presentation that we provided last week mapped out a number of key decision points, some larger, some smaller, and gave a timeline, a notional timeline of when those decisions would support us proceeding in a timely manner. It is always a challenge with these projects. Projects don't align with parliamentary cycles always, and that's that we have to manage through that together. The time, this will see out several parliaments, this project, and there will be recesses all throughout that we'll have to try and align with the best, but. Certainly, the calendar that we mapped out in that presentation, which had a number of decisions over the spring timeline, were kind of articulated from a perspective of aligning with continuing with the project schedule.
Okay, thank you. I think we've provided a lot of leeway. Mr. Turnbull.
Well, first of all, I just wanted to say I was extremely impressed by the work done to date, and I just want to thank you all for your work. It's going on the tour was quite an eye-opener as to the sheer size and complexity of the project that's being undertaken. So just wanted to commend you on all the attention to detail, and I really appreciate it. I have two areas that I want to ask about. One is cost control. There seems to be lots of conversation about that. And then I also want to ask something about process design. So under cost control, I'm going to start with that. You've mentioned iterative design, and I think in the tour you mentioned agile project management, two terms that I'm kind of aware of and comfortable with. I'm not sure if everybody else is aware of those. Maybe you could describe how, from your experience, those are actually really effective methods for cost control.
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. And I'll give a high level and then pass it over to my colleague, Ms. Garrett, who's responsible for the Center Block program. So we have as far as establishing the cost and schedule, we have quite a mature system within the precinct of obviously the designers as well as the constructors develop cost and schedules. We have our own in-house experts. And then we have independent risk, cost, and schedule experts. And what I like to call triangulation. So when our internal expertise and what we have coming from the designers and the constructors line up with the independent expertise that we have, then we feel quite comfortable that we've brought that to ground. When one of those points is out of sync, then we drive that to ground until we resolve that. That has been a tried and true methodology that we've used in the past to be able to deliver these projects on schedule. And I know that there's a number of kind of detailed, very important strategies that are being employed in the Center Block program, and I'll ask Ms. Garrett to add some detail.
Of course, thank you for the question. So maybe in terms of, before we launch into more of the strategic aspects of what you might be referring to, rest assured we've got very strong controls in terms of contract management and financial management day to day in the project. We make sure that we're executing those contract activities and that we're monitoring those costs and that we are making sure that the work that is being delivered on site brings value for Canada. But I think where your question is really going is to the strategic aspect of cost, and I think what is most interesting about the project, and based on best practices in terms of project management, what we are executing on the project is what we call integrated lean program delivery. And two key aspects of that I think are worth highlighting for this conversation is really the physical and physical integration of key stakeholders, from the parliamentary administrations to the independent cost support to our constructor and designer in one physical location. And beyond that, we have further broken down those barriers. So regardless of who you work for example, the assessment program we were here talking about last week, you worked together and you were co-located. So we're further trying to break down those barriers to collaborate and exchange information. As it pertains to agile design and cost control, one of the aspects of as we get your feedback and we start to understand the functional program and we start to lay down what those broad options are and we make decisions, we're going to design to budget. So we will use target value design, and we've already got an approach for how we're going to do that for key aspects of the design process, and we will appropriate budgets that are associated with those key areas, ranging from heritage conservation to the chamber as key examples, and we will work to make sure that we're aligning the design with those budget constraints and flagging when we feel like we are not achieving those fundamental requirements that might affect your operations at the end of the day, or otherwise generating efficiencies out of those exercises and reprofiling them to other parts of the program where they might be more needed.
20 seconds. Oh, wow. So one more question then. It sounds like to manage costs, one of the key things that we need within that iterative process is input from MPs, as well as senators, of course. But so I'm just wondering what the process looks like for that consultation so far.
Well, essentially, like I said, traditionally the board has been making those decisions and those consultation. There's been broader consultation as our team consulted previous board PROC members individually in terms of their input, but also the appearance before this committee is also helpful for us. We're going to be having a meeting of the board this Thursday where we're going to discuss the going forward governance decision making.
Okay, thank you. Monsieur Terrien, you have 2.5 minutes.
Okay for me.
Okay, Miss Blaney?
I'm happy to take those 2.
Okay, sure.
You want to pass it on. So one of the questions that I have is around the realities that, you know, as Ms. Duncan said earlier, how historic a lot of the work is in that space. And what I'm curious about is the skill set needed to duplicate in some cases that craft work. How are you going to manage this? I'm assuming in the other buildings you had to deal with this too, but in the center block it's going to be even more required, I guess, for you to do that. And how do you manage budgets as you're looking at these particular detailed craft works that are needed?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Madam Chair. It's a really important question. The capacity challenge is fundamental to success on these projects, and the work that we've undertaken over the past decade plus have really reaped benefits for this program. When we were at the very early stages of the West Block, for example, there really wasn't much of a masonry industry, local masonry industry left, and that's been revitalized through these projects. And we've worked with a range of universities and colleges. We worked with Algonquin College to put in place a program there, apprenticeship programs. We had the largest apprenticeship program in stonemasonry in North America, and 30% participation of female trades in that area, which is, again, the largest in North America. For example, two of the carvers that worked on the West Block won international gold and silver medals. So there's been a revival of these really important trades, the copper roofing industry, etc. So, and at the same time, we continue to innovate. So we've done a lot of work with Carleton University, for example, on digitizing the facilities, the center block first and foremost. That is enabling us to do robotic assisted fabrication that is working hand in glove with the tradespeople and the expert crafts people working on these projects. So several of the elements throughout this building and the Senate of Canada building were first kind of handcrafted and then robotically assisted fabrication through 3D modeling. And that is going through when we are going to repair a grotesque or a gargoyle. That can be developed in 3D image, and then we can work to fabricate that using robotics, and then have the craftspeople put the final touches on it. So we've made a lot of progress, I would say, over the past decade, both from the capacity of working with what can be an industry with some capacity challenges, as well as innovating to find solutions that will work to ensure that we're able to achieve all of the objectives of this, most important project in Canada.
Mm-hmm. And another, challenge that I know with some of these older buildings is the issue of accessibility, not just for folks that are working and coming to visit here, but also for the members. So I'm just wondering, in terms of accessibility, I'm specifically really interested as you're looking at the House of Commons. What sort of work are you doing to make sure that there's more accessibility for members who may be elected?
Absolutely. It's a critical question. Thank you for the question. It's the center block has a lot of accessibility challenges. When you look around, the public gallery is a prime example. And there's lots of other areas. We faced those same challenges in this building, as well as the former Government Conference Centre, which is now the Senate of Canada building. And we've been able to achieve significant improvements, in many cases exceeding the building codes from an accessibility perspective. We're continuing to push forward on accessibility so we are working through those challenges of how to find the balance between the preservation of the heritage and improving the accessibility. Sometimes that requires some remodeling of the space. Sometimes that involves putting elevators in different places so that you can get to an accessible entry point. So the gallery in the chamber is a perfect example of feeding an elevator to a point where there's accessibility, avoids the stairs that go down into the gallery as one example. And if we are to retain the House of Commons chamber, it will require some kind of remodeling of the gallery to make it fully accessible. But we are working through that, and we have plans that enable the chamber to be fully accessible, the gallery to be accessible, and all key areas of public interaction and that are core to parliamentary use.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Since the committee is working so well together, I thought that rather than go back, since we've completed our formal rounds, that we have an informal round, and people have been putting their names on the list, and each person would get 5 minutes to speak. So the list as we have it right now is Ms. Pettipas-Taylor, Mr. Duncan, Mr. Broussard, then Mr. Gerritsen. And if we have more time, we will also take more. Mr. Turnbull. Okay, so Ms. Pettipas-Taylor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And also I wanted to thank the committee members for hosting us last week at Centre Block. We oftentimes say a picture is worth 1,000 words, and being on site really provided us with a great opportunity to see the extent of this huge project, this huge undertaking that we are taking on. You may have already answered this question, so please excuse me if I've missed it. But we certainly recognize that when we moved into West Block, the building is beautiful, but it perhaps isn't optimal to meet all of our needs. And I'm wondering, what was the consultation process like with members of Parliament when doing the work for West Block? And again, I recognize that the Senate is not here, so this was really just, members of Parliament. But I'm just wondering what type of work was undertaken with respect to the consultation process with respect to the members of Parliament, and how long did it take?
Personally, like I said, I don't think the consultation was sufficient with members in terms of designing the accommodation of the West Block. So it's a project that spanned over 7 years.
So I guess just to dig a bit more, It's not sufficient, but what did it look like?
Maybe you can talk a bit.
Essentially, there wasn't a whole lot of individual consultation with members. The administration at the time was looking at the consultations that happened pre-2001. 2001, there were established standards that were approved at the board level, and so those were the standards that we were working with to get through the design of the West Block in the early years. And the governance was that went up at a higher level to not in the granularity, but went through the Board of Internal Economy for decision making.
So if I understand correctly, the final decisions for this building, the final decision rested with the Board of Internal Economy, is that?
Correct. But again, not at a granular level. That was being delegated down to the administration.
Okay. And I believe it may have been Mr. Duncan that had asked a question earlier, if I can piggyback on that, or perhaps I just, again, perhaps didn't hear the question. Is there any decisions that need to be made, though, that if they're not made by a certain timeline, that this is going to be detrimental to the budget? we've indicated that we have a 10-year timeline here to get this project completed. I'm assuming that there has to be some decisions that you're going to need to have, some input fairly quickly. And I'm just wondering, what does that time frame look like?
So I think so. First and foremost, there layered decision making can occur if we have all the decisions at one time. That's optimal. But first and foremost, I would say the size of the chamber and the size of the visitor welcome center are the two most critical decisions, because the first, we're now doing the deconstruction work, asbestos abatement, and that can proceed without those decisions. We have an approach on that. But the structural work in the building would really be the next layer of work. And having agreement on the size of the Visitor Welcome Center so that we can continue with that excavation work, and whether we are going to retain the House of Commons chamber or enlarge it. Those would be the two most critical decisions that would be ideal to have this spring so that we could proceed with the design and construction in parallel in a layered approach.
Thank you.
That's it. Okay. Mr. Duncan.
Thank you. Hello again. A couple of questions to go through. Is there any conversation, everything is returning to center block once center block reopens, but is there any conversation, any options being presented about certain aspects staying in West Block? The reason I just throw this out here is as I was sitting in the chamber of West Block, we talk about enlarging center block and the kind of the constraints that are there, the 2-floor lobbies. Just throwing it out for a context, is there any conversation saying, look, if you actually keep the chamber, for example, where it is in West Block now, it could be expanded? Because again, that footprint and that back hallway in the lobbies, to me, would seem a lot more, could be more feasible than the constraints of center block. Is there any conversations, or is it purely everything going back to center block?
I'm going to say there's conversation in terms of leveraging the West Block facilities. Yeah. In terms, I'm going to say, in terms of the administration, for example, to maximize space for MPs in the center block.
Okay.
The one that you're suggesting in terms of the chamber, I would suggest that's a discussion that
Fair. Just wasn't sure if that's an option, or again, I still struggle with the path we have to have these conversations or these ideas and that forum, but I'll get back to that. Block 2 in the redevelopment, just the relationship with the City of Ottawa. Just wondering in all of this, are you in regular contact with the City of Ottawa? And I think right now, Spark Street BIA and the major redevelopment that's going along there, I would just hate to see those conflict. And just wondering, have you done similar presentations like this to the Planning Committee or the Subcommittee on Heritage for the City of Ottawa?
Absolutely. We work hand in glove with the city, the NCC, the Spark Street Mall Authority, and the BIA. In fact, we worked in partnership with the City of Ottawa on the initial kind of planning and consultation for the revitalization of Spark Street. We gave a storefront for the consultation to occur and provided some funding to support that development. So it is fully integrated, and they're, I would say, quite supportive of the direction that we're proceeding.
Quick follow-up on that. Wellington Street, is there any conversation specifically with the City of Ottawa on the future of Wellington Street? We're talking about sparks from the pedestrian, but I think one of the challenges is sometimes from the precinct safety security is the future of Wellington and what it's used for, how it's used, that type of thing.
There's, I would say, there's been ongoing conversation around Wellington for a long time. So that's an ongoing conversation. I would say that the LRT and how transport works within the capital.
Let's not talk about LRT. Yeah, no.
And the links between Gatineau and Ottawa have, to a certain extent, revitalize some of those conversations and how Wellington can be, maximized in the future.
Appreciate it. Just cognizant of time here too. One of the things, again, reading the Holyrood Inquiry, one of the things I was interested as a subnote of this, the BBC had a very good relationship with the Scottish Parliament to document the work being done through video, through interviews, that type of thing. And I think of that from a historical perspective, or Canadians being able to see the front lines like we got to see was very, very cool. And I know there's been some tweets out from members of that, and there was a lot of interest from the general public. anything being done, to consider that of opening it up, not doing public tours like we got, but through video or any sort of relationship of documentary work being done on this work? I think of the number of Canadians that watch HGTV or whatever it may be, there might be an interest, but.
Yeah. And this has been I would say, an ongoing conversation between ourselves and the parliamentary partners. It is a joint, it is a partnership, and we're trying to look at what is the best approach for that. But I would agree, it's a good idea. Okay.
And lastly, so just the last comment I have or question is, where do we go from here? I think we've had a lot of comments about governance and some of the concerns we've got over this, and I do think when we talk about BOIE and some of their approvals, and I question respectfully what our role as PROC is. If BOIE's got some of those approvals, are we here for questions? Are we here as part of that MP consultation stage? And is it our work to go out to members? So I just wonder kind of what next steps are for us, having got the information, kind of knowing and seeing some of these challenges of working between BOIE, the House, the Senate, PROC, Cabinet, Treasury Board, all these approvals and angles. I don't have an answer, but that's more of a rhetorical one for ourselves as a committee, and perhaps any comment you may have on suggested improvements or next steps of what goes on.
The next step I would suggest is the board meeting on Thursday in terms of continuing the discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We focused a lot over the last week or so on the physical aspects of the building and the reconstruction process. But I want to talk about the brains within the building, and I'm certainly not talking about members of Parliament, and I include myself in that. But, Mr. Obey, you weren't going to get off easy on this one. Information technology. And I can imagine over the course of all of these years, the absolute hornet's nest that exists within that building on information technology. We've heard about the physical limitations of heating and ventilation. Where do you see us going in terms of the reconstruction process on information technology compared to where we are right now?
Well, the biggest challenge is planning for the proper infrastructure for allowing us to have the proper connectivity when the time comes. Because as you know, trying to plan 10 years ahead of time, when we know that in our lifespan of technology, we live on a 3-year basis. So we just can't plan for 15 years ahead of time. But the goal is, as Mr. Wright says, and Mrs. Garrett said, is that we have team members, technology team members that are integrated into the construction team. So our goal right now is to work closely with them to have the proper infrastructure everywhere in the facility. So that way we can then talk about the systems and the solutions once we'll be in the design stage of the building in order to provide the services. But that is another area that we will need consultation with members, because as you know, if we're moving towards a chair layout in the chamber versus a desk, that's certainly going to need to change how we interact with you from a technology perspective in the chamber. Being said that I won't be able to supply you with a Surface or a laptop. We'll need to find different ways to interact. Same thing for voting. So there's different things that we're going to be looking at over the next year, but our focus right now is really on the infrastructure, making sure that the infrastructure is everywhere in the facility so that we can have the proper security, the proper connectivity, proper also environmental control systems that you will require in this new facility, sir.
So just as it's difficult to project the costs in the physical aspect of the building, given all of the various options that exist, how do you possibly work on projecting the costs for what's required in 10 years and then what will be required in subsequent years as that technology changes? How is that even possible?
So our approach currently, and to Mr. Wright's point earlier, we've built a lot of buildings over the last 5 years. So we've built the chamber, we've built many committee rooms, we've built many meeting rooms, we've built many offices. So we have baselines right now that we've established over the years of how much a committee room costs, how much a chamber costs from a technology. And our approach sure is to constantly revise these through the submissions processes of Public Works. And if there's any changes to that, they're raised and escalated. But we certainly work closely with the project team to make sure that we use the baselines and the experience that we've had through our different renovations, and then supply that as a baseline of budgets. And then look at how things evolve. And I must say, sir, I've been in the field for about 30 years. The price of a PC hasn't changed a whole lot over the last 10 years. It's just the functionality that seems to evolve within that PC, but I've necessarily didn't get a rebate in prices, with all the new stuff that they're offering us. So, and I've seen pretty much the same thing around the audiovisual aspect, the broadcasting aspects over the last 10 years when we did chambers and committees. Our budgets have pretty much been similar, recognizing the technologies have changed a whole lot within them. So,
I also imagine too that the visitor experience, the technology within that has evolved obviously significantly, and so incorporating some of that, maybe give us an idea of where your thinking is at on that.
So we're in the initial phases of the discussion with the library, and I would say that I don't want to pass this along to Mr. Morin, but once the concept is aligned, and the library is already working with the University of Carleton, also different universities for looking at virtual tours, looking at physical tours, looking at the audiovisual requirements. Once we nail this down over the next year and we have an agreement of what the experience that we are going to expect by members for the visitor welcome center, we'll be able to cost these out fairly easily because it's very similar costing sort of these facilities than building a community room, because we do have a very good understanding of what they cost to put proper projecting facilities and proper also connectivity within these spaces.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Garrettson.
Thank you very much. I just have a couple quick questions and a comment. First of all, Mr. Wright, to your point about working with other colleges and universities, my understanding is that the college, Algonquin College, actually canceled that historic Mason program back in the spring of 18. Is that because there isn't work here, or you talked about an industry that had been revived, but it seems as though Algonquin College was struggling to get people into the program.
Yeah, you're quite right that program was canceled. We had some conversations with Algonquin College at the time, and I think it was really around financial considerations of running a college rather than the masonry industry. Yeah. So it's like every.
But I guess do you still have the people to do the work?
I would say that two things. One is that there's been a significant capacity that's been built in the capital region through this work, and capacity remains a challenge. It is a challenge within this industry across the country, and there are certain demographic realities within this industry. That,
and it's not the masonry program that was canceled. It's the historic masonry program. So just for clarification on that. Question, Mr. Patrice, maybe you're best for this. Who decides the room allocation? Like when this building was being built, who decided that the opposition whip's office was on the 4th floor? Or is it the third party? Maybe it's one of the whips is on the. Oh, you're on the floor. Like who decides that stuff? Who decides where those rooms are going to be located?
I'm going to say, unfortunately for this building, it was the administration. Oh. Room allocation is the whip's prerogative. So that's for the future, and that's what.
So, but you're saying for this building, it was done by administration.
Yeah.
Okay. And has there ever been any thought given to, after things are complete? I'll preface this with my comment. I come from a municipality that takes great pride in its heritage. Our City Hall in Kingston, you can't put a nail in the wall to hang a picture without getting approval from a curator. What I've always found to be most remarkable about Centre Block when people have asked me about it is, having come from that perception of heritage, and that almost to the point where people don't even want to have meetings in City Hall anymore because it's easier to do it somewhere else because of all the heritage impacts and elements to doing it. What I've always found remarkable about Centre Block, and what I've told people, is that it is just as much an opportunity for people to learn about Canadian heritage as it is a practical building that is utilized. any given room can be a reception in the evening, and then the next morning it's a caucus room, and then later on it's a committee room. They're very practically used buildings, and to the point that Mr. Duncan brought up about wires dangling everywhere, and as much as it takes away from a bit of that historic element, it really provides the functionality of it. And so that's what I guess this building lacks is it's very functional. This building is top notch in terms of technology, but it misses the component of the public engagement. When you were in Center Block, you always felt like I was in a publicly open building, because as you walk through the hallways, you would see people walking along, on a tour. This feels more like an office building. And I understand the constraints that led to that. So I'm not criticizing this building. But what I'm saying is, how do we ensure that when we develop and redo Center Block, that we keep those elements of the historic, telling Canada's story and welcoming visitors and welcoming Canadians into it, while at the same time providing for that level of functionality? Does it include, and I say this very cautiously, something, for example, like having more administration in this building and utilizing that building more for, the parliamentary purpose of it?
That's certainly the vision in terms of the Center Block, in terms of, and like I said, leveraging this facility for the administration or other functionality. Now that it's a nice building, those committee rooms will remain, for example, and also other facilities that we may have across the street. For me, Center Block, as you said, it's an heritage building. It's one of our most symbolic building in Canada, but it's also your workplace. It's where you do your work, it's where you meet your constituency, and where you meet Canadians, and so on. We need to recognize that. This building, at the time, and it's always easy hindsight to look at the facility and say, it should have been better, and I have those thoughts myself often enough. But at that time, they said that this building was a temporary chamber, and it was designed in a view that this would become an office building. So, right. But it means that for that period of time where it's an interim chamber, it doesn't look and feel like Center Block was in terms of the nature. The inside of that building was essentially gutted because it had no heritage fabric, because of a previous renovation.
Thank you, Mr. Patrice. Ms. Blaney, then Mr. Turnbull, then Ms. Duncan.
Well, thank you for the second or third opportunity. One of the things that I am really curious about is, as you're going through the building and doing the renovations and the upgrading that's so desperately needed, while looking at maintaining the important heritage, I'm just curious about how security fits into this whole aspect. So if you could just talk a little bit about sort of how you're maneuvering some of the security issues and the challenges that we were faced when we were in Center Block, and how hopefully those will be remedied.
And I'll kind of talk at a high level to a certain extent, but I would say that there's first and foremost a layered approach. So every building sits within kind of a broader security perspective. So over the past number of years, there's been efforts to create greater security around the movement of vehicles, for example. So the vehicle screening facility and bollards that have been implemented. Phase 1 of the Visitor Welcome Center is all about ensuring that the public they go through proper security screening. So phase 2 of the Visitor Welcome Center which will apply that to the Center Block and the East Block, is a critical security initiative. There are also cameras that are integrated throughout the facilities, and the controls on doors to ensure that those can all be managed and locked down as required. There are control points at all the exterior doors in facilities such as the West Block, and then we look at elements such as hardening of the building as required, ballistic in some areas, as well as efforts at cybersecurity and speech security to ensure that if you're having a private conversation in a room, it is indeed a private conversation. All those elements which didn't exist in the center block previously will be applied as we move forward in its modernization.
I can imagine that's very interesting and complex. So one of the things that there has been some discussion around is the Visitor Welcome Center area. And I understand that by building that up, hopefully that will also, and you mentioned that, increase the ability and capacity for better security. But I'm just wondering, in the vision of it, what other functions? Like, I know there's the 3 different sizes, and sort of the large is like everything that you can imagine in terms of meeting rooms. But I'm just curious about how that's going to work, because storage, I know it's really boring, but if you've ever renovated anything, one of the biggest issues that you have is storage, and where do you put things? So I understand that part of that welcome center in the bigger vision would include storage, but if that's not going to work out, just how are you planning around storage?
Yeah. So in those 3 options, just at a very high level, and I can pass it to Ms. Garrett for some greater detail, but the smaller option, first and foremost, security is there, plus kind of back of house functionality. The medium size one, on top of security, adds the library program to it and the visitor experience. And then the largest, on top of those 2 key objectives, adds some greater core parliamentary space. I would say larger committee rooms for the Senate of Canada, for example, as well as meeting space from the House of Commons. But I can ask Ms. Garrett to add some greater detail.
Yeah, so in the small, so we've got basically 3 different sizes of the Visitor Welcome Center, and in fact, just to maybe supplement, not duplicate for the sake of time, we really are in between in terms of the libraries program, just to maybe start there. In terms of the small and the medium, we're really talking about the difference between a capability that just supports tours, like putting back the capability that exists now, but the medium one does provide for a curated experience, an alternate experience for visitors that are coming to the Hill. There are no committee rooms in terms of the small and medium options as they pertain to the House of Commons. The committee room function is driven by Senate of Canada requirements, just to be very clear about that. And then what we're really also talking about is safe, but for all options, it's consistent. We're talking about a safe, secure screening capability that is outside the footprint of the center block building proper. And then finally, for all of them, focusing between the small and the medium, we're really talking about making sure that we have one integrated parliamentary campus, and that buildings like the West Block, the Center Block, and the East Block, regardless of where parliamentarians are in that parliamentary complex, are connected and can work in a cohesive manner, functioning physically throughout that building complex. So it becomes essentially one connected facility.
Thank you, Ms. Garnett. Mr. Turnbull.
Thanks. I just wanted to go back and sort of follow up because I kind of felt like I got cut off last time. But so thanks for giving me a bit more time. It sounded like there were key crux decisions that impact, cost, timelines, configuration, space allocation, and project management for sure. I think you've mentioned those in your briefing: Visitor Welcome Center, the chamber, the gallery, the lobbies, all have key decisions that need to be made. And that have pretty big impact on the overall parameters of this project. Size and scope, I think, are going to shift dramatically depending on, like you said, if there's structural changes that the chamber needs to be expanded or something, that's a big decision that's going to impact everything else. So I guess I'm going back to, what are the methods of engagement that should be used and included in a process like this in order to help make some of those key decisions, because they really are key. To my colleague's point from, the Conservative Party, concerned about costs and cost overruns, I think ensuring that we have a good process for engaging MPs in helping make some of those decisions is probably going to help manage costs and expectations. So how often, so my really clear question after the long preamble is, what are the methods of engagement that should be used, and how often should MPs be given input in an ideal scenario?
Well, it's a bit unknown at this stage, like I said, because the discussion will be pursued with the Board of Internal Economy this Thursday. But obviously, in terms of making those decisions and the iterative process for those decisions and the various options, I'm going to say that's going to require quite an implication by members, whoever is going to be.
But should it be continuous? Should it be upfront? Should it be, at key pivotal moments throughout the project?
I think it will be a continuous engagement with those who are tasked with that responsibility in terms of making those decisions. So, for example, to give you an example, in the past Parliament, the Visitor Welcome Center, there was a working group that was established by the Board of Internal Economy. And it's a significant, but on that question and the recommendation that came, the group met for over 6 hours in 3 different meetings in terms of that iterative and so on, and briefing and coming back with option and with cost and projected costs and things of that nature.
So, and did that working group work well to help make some of those decisions at the time?
From my point of view, it did work well, but that was in the past Parliament.
Okay. Yeah. I still have time. Oh, this is great.
You have 2 minutes.
So I'll ask another one of my questions that I had, which is back to energy efficiency. I'm just interested in hearing more around any innovations. Clearly this is a topic that we all believe in today. We're looking at energy efficiency in homes. We're looking at energy efficiencies anywhere we can achieve them, and looking at renewable energy and clean tech. So I'm just interested to know whether any of those new technologies or advancements or innovations are being incorporated into the design concept.
Absolutely. And with all of the projects that we've completed, sustainability has been a critical objective from the baseline of 2005. We've reduced GHG emissions by 56% to 2018. So a little ahead of our target. I think the target for that timeline was 40%, by a decade ahead of that target and further. With each project, we've done implemented a number of initiatives from a sustainability perspective. And right now we're undergoing research with the NRC and the University of Concordia, specifically on the thermal performance of heritage buildings and how to improve their performance from an energy conservation perspective. Of course, there will be water conservation. The use for the first time, really, the center block will be hooked up to modern heating and cooling with modern essentially facilities driving all that, which will drive down the energy consumption significantly. LED lighting, on and on. Within, for example, the Sir John A. Macdonald building and the chamber here, we use the recycling of air. So in the summer, we're able to vent hot air. In the winter, we're able to recycle from the upper portions of large volumes back down to the ground level. It is a priority, and maybe I'll ask Ms. Garrett to give a couple more details on the center block in particular.
Certainly. Thank you for the question. So I think one of the context pieces for this actual particular rehabilitation program is that the courtyards that are contained in the center block are really exterior walls. So for a building of its size, which is already very large, you have a significantly higher percentage of exterior exposure. So right now we are pursuing a design solution that will actually close those courtyards, effectively making those exterior walls interior walls, which will bring us significant gains along the sustainability spectrum, as well as provide optionality in terms of physical use of the space. So it's a win-win situation in terms of that. We have baselined the building, and we're working very hard to be a flagship for sustainability and understand where we can push the envelopes as the design progresses forward. But we're not there yet in terms of understanding exactly what technology we're going to be putting into the building and how that will relate to the broader campus, which also has a sustainability objective.
Thank you, Ms. Garnett. Ms. Duncan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And before I start, could I just thank our colleagues who've come here, the officials, and would you like a minute just to go, because this is exhausting. Would you just like a minute to breathe?
We enjoyed the discussion.
Okay.
We're learning a lot.
Seems to be, at this current moment, at least this is the last member, 5 minutes of questioning, and I think at that point we will be able to adjourn this part of the meeting. Yeah.
Okay. I'm just going to come back to that 1996 study, and I know you're going to table that with the committee, but how, without enlarging the chamber, how many seats did that 1996 community study offer?
I can't speak specifically to the night. I don't have it with me. I can say that the studies that we've been undertaking, which would have leveraged that, I'm quite sure. The maximum that we've been able, and it still bumps around by a few, but 429 is the maximum that we've been able to fit into the space, but it would be somewhere in the 420 zone that we would be able to fit as for members in the chamber.
Thank you, Mr. White. I'm going to come back to, I am very worried about the governance issues. And I mentioned in 1916, there was a joint committee to bring both the House and the chamber together to oversee the construction. And I think we need to do some work around that. I'm wondering if you could table with the committee, and we've all asked questions around governance, but I think it's important to see what that governance structure is. So if we could have a diagram to that effect. And then also how the decisions are being prioritized and challenged, and to ensure highest and best use. If that could also be tabled with the committee. And I'm going to come back to the visitor center. I think anyone who comes to Parliament Hill, when you see that great expanse and you see that beautiful building, there's a sense of awe as you walk up to it. And then when you go in the entrance, it's the rotunda. And you look around the rotunda, and it's the signs and symbols of Canada. It reminds parliamentarians where they come from, and more importantly, who they serve. So how do we ensure the cultural heritage and the story of Canada are not lost?
Yeah. Thank you for the question. It's a very important question. And the center block, if you may know, when it was rebuilt, it was essentially very much a blank canvas, and the story of Canada has been filled over the past century, and there still are spaces for the story of Canada to continue being told in the center block, and that will be a key component of the project. And we'll be working with the House of Commons, the curator, the Dominion sculptor, and others to develop an appropriate strategy to ensure that it tells both our past and where we're going as well.
Thank you, Mr. White. And the last thing I'm going to come back to, this is not just a building. It is the past of Canada. It is our future. When you think of what Mr. Pearson designed, in that wonderful chamber where we turn the pages to remember those that gave their life in the service of this country. The stonework there was brought from Europe. It was brought from Europe, and when that building was built, it was the only place that people could come and honor the fallen. I want to know how we are going to protect that space, please.
So we are very conscious of the heritage value of the center block. It holds the highest designation. It's a classified heritage building. And we work hand in hand with FIBRO, which is the Federal Heritage Review board that actually advises on how we treat the heritage elements in our classified buildings. So we consult with them, we take advice from them. They're an advisory board, and we have experts, whether it be on our own staff, through the consultants that Public Works has engaged, who have spent, their careers working on heritage facilities. So we're very conscious. We understand the value that certainly is embodied in the design of the center block, and our hope and aspiration is to preserve that and actually add a new layer with the Visitor Welcome Center of current cultural heritage that, 100 years from now will be respected equally as the center block is to us today.
Okay, well, I guess that comes, the rounds of questionings have come to an end, and I want to thank everyone from the House of Commons, from the Library of Parliament, from Public Works for being here today. All of you did your very best to answer our questions, and I know some of them were tough. Our wonderful clerk is also going to give you access to the blues and all the information you might need to provide some of the requests that were asked for here today. And perhaps you might just have, even if they weren't formal requests, some more information to provide as a follow-up to some of the questions that we may not have gotten complete answers today on. But other than that, I'd like to call this portion of the meeting to an end and suspend for about, I think, 5 minutes before we move into committee business. Is that okay with everyone? Okay, thank you to the witnesses. like all the members are currently in the room, I'm going to call this meeting back to order. Okay, we have a couple of things that have been brought to our notice. First is Mr. Richard's motion, and I believe Ms. Blaney may also want to talk about her motion, but we'll move on to your motion first, Mr. Richards. Sure.
I'll just read the motion into the record. I think it's fairly self-explanatory, and the reasons for it probably we don't need to spend a lot of time dwelling on because it's fairly obvious. It's typical and standard. So just that the committee invite the President of the Queen's Privy Council for Canada and departmental officials and the Chief Electoral Officer and Elections Canada officials to appear on Supplementary Estimates B before the reporting deadline set out in Standing Order 81.5, and that these appearances be televised.
Okay. Any debate? Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say that I don't have any opposition to the motion, but I just want to raise a point about inviting Minister LeBlanc. I've just been informed that because of his health, he's probably not going to be able to appear until after the deadline that is mentioned in this motion. So I just want the record to state that there's no objection for the minister to appear before the committee, but he may not be able to make it before the deadline stated in the motion.
Mr. Richards?
Well, I mean, I know we had that conversation, and I understood that, and obviously everyone here is respectful of the health challenges, and he can govern himself as he needs to in relation to that, for sure, and that's something we all understand.
Okay, so in his place, we could have his officials attend.
Well, or his parliamentary secretary could possibly attend as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So is everyone?
The only thing to mention is that televised will make every attempt to do so, but we're. But it is.
So I just wanted to point out that I was just made aware, since there's a lot of competition sometimes for the crews for televising the committee appearances. We will try our best to make sure that this request is approved and that the committee meeting is televised. But if it is not possible, then is it okay if we are webcast? I mean, that's our default position anyways, but we will do our best. And I think it should be possible. It's just every now and then.
I wouldn't see why there'd be any trouble with that. It should be doable.
Apparently, it's the amount of crews that the issue is, not the room or the capability or the technology, but the amount of crews that they have. So I don't foresee it being necessarily a problem, but I've been informed that it has been at times. So it could be. There's a possibility. I can inform you of that possibility if that does occur.
Just ask you come back to the committee and let us know that, and we can see what we can do to address it.
Yeah. All right. Is everyone in favor of this motion? Okay. Motion passed.
Now, before you go on to that, in terms of the timing for it,
This meeting may need to take place a little bit sooner than what we might be thinking, just because of the constituency week that we have in March. So we'll be inviting them for either the 10th of March or the 12th of March, just for your information. And I saw that Ms. Blaney's hand was up. Ms. Blaney.
Thank you so much. And as you all know, there is a motion on the floor that I would like to bring forward. I'm not sure if that requires an official motion, but I'm hoping that we can discuss the motion further today.
Okay.
and if there's consent for that all to go.
Your original motion, is that what you're referring to, Ms. Blaney?
Yes.
Okay. If there's consent to move back to that motion, is everyone okay with discussing Ms. Blaney's motion? Okay. All right. Would you like to start, Ms. Blaney?
So I just want to thank everyone so much for how long this has taken. We've been a little bit busy in the last little while. So again, just to go back to the core motion, which is just really addressing the issue that we have a minority parliament, that there are 4 parties recognized in the House of Commons, and that it would be nice to have that reflected in all of our committees. You know, I had a member come to me and show that, you know, he's on an important committee. He is not in the position of a vice chair. And a letter was sent to the vice chairs and the chair of the committee. And somebody noticed that there was no representative in that role from the NDP, so forwarded him the letter saying, you know, we're not sure what role you have on the committee, but here's the information we sent to the chair and the vice chairs. So I think we really have to look at this as addressing the issue of making sure that when we're here at this table, that all of our recognized parties are remembered, and that those stakeholders that may connect with our committees at their own time, that they are recognizing all of the parties that are at the table. And that's what I'm hoping to address today. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Blaney. Mr. Gerritsen, and just a reminder as well that technically we are on Mr. Richards' amendment when it comes to this motion at this point.
So thank you very much for that. And so to the amendment, Madam Chair, the issue that was kind of flagged and seems to make sense is that the way that the amendment is currently proposed by Mr. Richards, that includes the condition on the multiple vice chairs and multiple double dipping, if you will, is that it leads to a scenario, in at least my opinion, and I believe it's the clerk's opinion or yours too, Madam Chair, that if this is passed and it goes back to the House, because the one part of it is not enforceable, it would actually make the entire motion moot, for lack of better expression. My position is that we will. I'm going to be voting against the amendment as put forward by Mr. Richards. And then hopefully, if it does not pass, Madam Chair, then I would put forward another amendment that would effectively capture the same intent and send the required component of this over to the body that would oversee how this is done. So my intent is to vote against the amendment, Madam Chair, and if it does not pass, then I'm willing to put forward another amendment that hopefully captures the same thing that Mr. Richards was trying to do.
Any more discussion? Okay, so can we vote on the amendment? Mr. Richards' amendment, sorry, to Ms. Blaney's motion. Mm-hmm. Sure. Recorded vote. Okay, recorded vote.
He was slipping there. Good thing you reminded him.
Okay, this is on Mr. Richards' amendment. Mr. Algabra?
No.
Ms. Duncan? No. Mr. Gerritsen?
No.
Madame Petitpas-Taylor?
No.
Mr. Turnbull?
No.
Mr. Broussard?
Oui.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Mr. Richards?
Yes.
Mr. Tucker?
Yes.
Monsieur Terrien?
Je m'abstiens.
Miss Blaney?
Okay, the amendment is defeated. The noes have it. Yes, Mr. Gerritsen.
So with that, Madam Chair, I would put forward, and I'll give these to the clerk to distribute. I think everybody on this side already has one, but it's in French and English, and I hope captures the intent that the Motion as presented by Ms. Blaney be amended so that it reads following Standing Order 104, and that the committee requests that the Board of Internal Economy, under the powers granted to it under Section 59 of the Parliament Act, enact a rule or order that the sessional allowance of members is reduced by the equivalent amount listed under Section 62.1H and 62.3 of the Library of Parliament Act when a member occupies more than one position under these provisions of the Act, so that the member may only receive one vice chair salary regardless of how many vice chair positions they hold. And just to that, Madam Chair, I believe that, and I will say, I believe, I won't speak on behalf of all Liberals at this table, but indeed, a lot of the discussion has focused around the idea of double dipping, and we seem, or at least I seem to be in agreement with that concept, and I would like to make sure that the proper body that has the jurisdiction to limit that ability is given the opportunity to do that. And so I believe that this amendment as presented, Madam Chair, will give will provide the request to Boyd to make that amendment, but at the same time, it would not make the entire motion moot, as I previously suggested prior to voting on the previous amendment.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments on this new motion? Yes, Mr. Richards.
Yes. I would like to move a sub-amendment to the amendment, just to be amended by just adding at the end of the amendment the following: provided that the amendment to Standing Order 106-2 shall not have effect until the said order under the Parliament of Canada Act has been implemented. So obviously, if we're going to be asking the Board of Internal Economy to deal with this, we should make sure that everything is resolved there prior to something taking effect. So that's the idea here, just to make sure that it all lines up properly and the decision is properly made prior to effect being taken.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Gertson.
So although I appreciate where this is going, I'm cautious about this because I don't know how long that will take. And I think to Ms. Blaney's point about getting the vice chairs in position so that they can be receiving the information as she described in the example that she set out, this could just be adding a delay into it. And I would also say that there's lots of representation on Boy. For example, the opposition whip and the opposition House leader both sit on Boy. So there is an opportunity, and I believe they're meeting very soon, as we heard from our presentation. But I think there is the opportunity to push this along, especially from the conservative position, which has really been spearheading this angle of it. So, I mean, my inclination would be to vote against the amendment, the sub-amendment, unless I hear great reason otherwise.
Can I ask you a question, Mr. Gerritsen? So if it was to go into effect, what would happen to the issue of the salaries in that interim period if it was to go into effect, but Boyd hasn't made?
I think that's a better question for you, Madam Chair.
Yes, it might be, and so that's not something.
I don't know.
Okay.
My interpretation of what Mr. Richards is trying to accomplish, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that nobody starts receiving. The positions are not appointed until Boy makes that decision and changes the rules with respect to the payment. I understand that Boy primarily works on consensus, so I would assume that the Conservatives who are on that, the House leader and the whip, will bring this up right away at the first Boy meeting, saying we need to take care of this because this matters to us. Let's do this right away, and rightfully so, because I think that the issue should be addressed. So all I was saying is that I think that the vehicle is there to drive this faster if the House leader and the whip on the Conservative side choose to do so in their participation on Boy.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gerritsen. Yes, Ms. Blaney.
Well, I think this is such a long process, and I really appreciate everybody's patience as we sort of look at the framework as we're addressing this type of minority parliament. I have to say that for me, this is timely. It's going to take time for this to go through the next step of coming to the House. So I will be pushing, of course, everyone to address this, but I do think that we are sending it already to the Board of Internal Economy. I think they can fix this, and they can fix it quickly. The real issue for many of my members is just being acknowledged. So I will not be supporting the sub-amendment, and hopefully, be pushing hard on my House Leader to make sure that this is addressed as quickly as possible through the appropriate channels.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Terrier.
Well, listen, I felt I was in conflict of interest earlier on. That's why I abstained. I wanted to explain my situation, but I no longer feel that way. I am not on this in conflict of interest. I don't hold two vice chairs. I'm new, though. I don't know how it worked before. But with respect to the third vice chair, the NDP, and our second vice chair at a committee, there was a moment of, shall I say, friction, or perhaps not, but people felt ill at ease because there would be this third position available at a certain point, and yet now this is dragging on. I present the position of the Bloc, and the NDP's position isn't ideal either. I understand. I have to speak to representatives in my party to see about this. Well, it all seems to me that this is a bit difficult for the people who sit on the committee. It puts them ill at ease.
Any other comments? Okay. I just need 30 seconds. Moved to vote on the Mr. Richards sub-amendment. Would you like a recorded vote for this one? Yes, I thought so. Especially for this, yes.
Okay.
Okay.
The question is on the sub-amendment. Mr. Algabra.
No.
Ms. Duncan.
No.
Mr. Garrettson.
No.
Madame Petitpas-Taylor.
No.
Mr. Turnbull.
No.
Mr. Broussard.
Oui.
Mr. Duncan.
Yes.
Mr. Richards.
Yes.
Mr. Tucker.
Yes.
Monsieur Terrien.
No.
Miss Blaney.
No.
Okay. So defeated. The sub-amendment is defeated, and now we will move to the Liberal amendment. Okay. I'm going to call a vote on the Liberal amendment. All in favor? Recorded vote.
Okay, question on Mr. Garrettson's amendment. Mr. Algabra.
Yes.
Miss Duncan.
Yes.
Mr. Garrettson.
Yes.
Madame Petitpas-Taylor. Mr. Turnbull.
Yes.
Mr. Broussard.
No.
Mr. Duncan.
No.
Mr. Richards.
No.
Mr. Tucker.
No.
Monsieur Terrien.
Oui.
Miss Blaney.
Yes.
Okay. So the amendment passes.
Now that we need to debate on the original motion as amended.
Is there any debate on the original motion as amended by the Liberal amendment?
Mr. Broussard.
Yes, Mr. Broussard.
Just a couple of quick points, Madam Chair. We've been dealing with this now for the better part of a month since this committee has been constituted, and I still have not been able to reconcile the fact that, here we are as members of Parliament effectively voting ourselves an increase when the normal practice is not that. I mean, there are many Canadians across this country who would love to be able to say to their employer or to themselves as employer, I'm going to give myself a $6,200 or $6,300 raise. As members of Parliament, we take it external. There's been several examples. Mr. Duncan, Mr. Gerritsen spoke about this. I certainly at Barrie City Council, when I was on there, we never made the decision of what kind of an increase we were going to have. We made the decision on whether we were going to get the increase as recommended by an external body of community-minded people who came together and made recommendations. So, you know, we're actually effectively changing the standing orders on the fly, which is against normal course of action around this place. The constitution of this place has been such that there's been consensus, and I fundamentally disagree with the fact that members of Parliament are giving themselves a raise. There is no need for a third vice chair at these committees. That hasn't been the normal course of practice around here, and I'm frankly embarrassed that we're at this point where we're doing this. And I think most Canadians would have trouble reconciling what's happening within this committee. And certainly there are people all over this country who are finding it awfully difficult to make ends meet. And we know the statistics. They've been repeated several times in terms of where Canadians are at on their monthly obligations and the inability to afford that. And boy, would they love to give themselves a $6,200 or $6,300 raise, and they just don't have that luxury. And so for members of Parliament to do that, quite frankly, I'm embarrassed by this. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Gerritsen.
Just very quickly, Madam Chair, I just want to point out for the record that we're not in any way of able to give ourselves a raise, as Mr. Brassard is suggesting. We could not unilaterally say we are going to give somebody a raise of X number of dollars. What we're doing is we're assigning another person a position, and for reasons, a very well put out reason by Ms. Blaney a few minutes ago about how one party was not getting access to information as a result of not having a vice chair position. We've taken a further step beyond that, Madam Chair, to ask Boy to look, who's responsible for establishing and setting those supplementary payments, to look at making sure that scenarios don't exist where people would be double dipping per se. So I just thought it was important to put on the record that we do not have the ability to give ourselves a raise. That's not, or to give anybody a raise for that matter. That's not what's happening here. We're assigning a position to individuals.
Okay, is everyone prepared to vote on the motion as amended? Okay, recorded vote.
On Blaney's motion as amended, Mr. Algabra?
Yes.
Ms. Duncan? Mr. Gerritsen?
Yes.
Madame Petipa-Taylor?
Oui.
Mr. Turnbull?
Oui.
Mr. Brassard?
No.
Mr. Duncan?
No.
Mr. Richards?
No.
Mr. Tucker?
No.
Monsieur Terrien?
Oui.
Ms. Blaney?
Yes. Okay, motion is carried. And yes, Ms. Blaney.
So I just want to take a quick moment of everyone's time and let you know that I will be putting a motion on notice, and I'm going to read it out into the record today. I just want to preface that by saying that this conversation has been really insightful for me. Again, I'll just say that for this Parliament, I think it's really important that we have the vice chairs in those roles. It lets people know who is representing the parties, and I believe that's important. But I would like to just say that this is the motion that in relation to the proposed change to the standing orders to add an additional vice chair for the remainder of the 43rd Parliament, the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs undertake a study on the issue of additional allowances for all vice chairs under the Parliamentary Act, and that the committee make recommendations and report its findings to the House. I just think it's important that PROC do its work on this issue. I think it's really important, and I want to thank all the members for this discussion, and I will make sure to get this into you as appropriate.
Okay, thank you for the notice, Ms. Blaney. I just wanted to bring to your attention that the next meeting is Thursday, and we're meeting with the minister from 12 to 1. We did have committee business slotted in from 11 to 12. Is it the desire of the committee maybe perhaps to have the steering committee meet at that time, or take committee business off the agenda since we don't have much going on in terms of that?
Well, if we get
we have the study.
If we get the notice.
Would you like to talk about the studies in the full committee, or would you like the steering committee
I think
to take a
that's
look
at
that?
the will of the committee. Of course, I would be happy to come here in the whole committee or the subcommittee to discuss motions that we need to move forward. I think it would be good for us to start planning the next steps for our committee, for sure. Thank you.
The other thing you might want to mention, now that they've adopted this, the next role will be for you.
Yes, just a reminder that now that we have passed and adopted this motion, I will be reporting this to the House, and then Boyd will be doing its work. And so as to the question before, did you want the next meeting, the first hour, to be a steering committee meeting or a meeting of the whole committee with all its members to discuss further studies and other business? Everyone? Steering committee? Yeah. Is that okay? Yeah. Okay. All right. So steering committee will meet from 11 to 12 and we'll be with the minister from 12 to 1. Thank you so much. Meeting adjourned. Bye.